Welcome back to Word Blindness. This is Juliette Hahn. I'm here with my co-host, Brent Sobel. How you doing?
Beautiful. How are you?
I'm good. And we have a very special guest, Chris Campbell. And on Instagram, you guys can find him at Not Campbell Soup. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
I'm so good. You know, it's a beautiful day in England. We don't get many of them. So I was walking around outside, just lapping up the sun. I've got shorts on, so you know it's going to be a good time.
I love it. So I want to preference a little bit. And I was going to start talking about this before I recorded, which sometimes I do. And then Brent's like, hit record. Why did you forget to hit record? So we found you on Instagram, and I don't know which one of us found you, but one of us did. And then we share in our DMs, we send your messages. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, I want to have Not Campbell Soup. That's what we call you. I want to have Not Campbell Soup on the podcast because all the stuff he is doing with dyslexia is you put a really fun spin on things, but there's some serious stuff. And I always kind of had more of a light, positive, like, oh, it's the superpower. And then I met Brent and he's like, yeah, but what about all the shit? And I was like, oh, I try not to think about the shit. Right. And then he's like,
we're really going down there. We just got on here. We just getting introduced to Not Campbell Soup and you're taking me down, Chris, we are greatly appreciated, obviously. Yes. It's, as you can see, we love to have fun. Life is serious, so we try and have fun there. But obviously, everything we talk about is serious. So we love how you do that, how you mix that. There is always a serious point to what you're doing it, but the spin, the way you put on it is kind of like me and my singing. Awesome.
Just top tier. It's oh, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. That's really kind.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we've sent it to a lot of people. So how I want to start this, because there's so many different ways that we can start this. However, I would love a little bit for you to take us down when you realized you were dyslexic. So kind of taking it back to whenever that was and kind of sharing with the listeners your story. And then we can kind of get into all the other, the avenues, all the rabbit holes.
Of course. Yeah. So I come from a long line of dyslexics, as many might know. Woo, shout out, lineage of dyslexia. So my grandpa was dyslexic. My dad was dyslexic. I think my dad got diagnosed at like 15 years old. And so he wanted to, if me and my sister were showing signs young, he wanted to get us to see if we were identified as be dyslexic as well. And so that's why at like 7 years old, I had a test. It came up as I am dyslexic. And so that's where I always find it so fascinating with other people's journeys that we sometimes forget that there might be stigma around dyslexia for some people because they found out late. And so there's all this buildup of frustration and anger. Whereas because I kind of didn't know anything but this, there's still a lot of stuff that's happened and there's been some low times and high times. But because I kind of always knew I was dyslexic, I didn't think there was anything weird about that.
Well, that's funny you mentioned that, Chris, because that's basically you too. I didn't find out this until I was 32. So there, and it's crazy how different where you are. UK is compared to us over here in North America. Like, Juliet comes from a long line of it, so you guys have a lot of similarities when we speak about this, and I think that's where I always call her the unicorn, right? To the dyslexia. And I take not the negative side. I didn't find out till I was 32. So I literally thought I was dumb and stupid. I didn't find out till I got my daughter tested. Like I never even heard the word dyslexia. Again, I grew up in Canada, small, at that relatively small town, spent a lot of time on the farm back and forth. I'd never heard the word till I was 32 when my daughter and I got diagnosed. So the similarities in your story is going to be very similar.
Well, and so I want to pause you there because yes, there was understanding. I did not have an official diagnosis until I was much older because I had. So I'm thinking that how old is your dad, if you don't mind me asking?
My dad's 65 now.
Okay.
Oh, you guys the same age, Juliet.
Yeah. Shut up. I look really good for 65, don't I?
You look good for 50. You just turned 50.
I did.
Happy birthday to you.
So that is one of the things though. So I had a process, like they said, I had a processing, right? It was a processing thing, but it was never official. I didn't get services because it was like, okay, you're processing slow and you're just average IQ. I didn't do very well on the IQ. So it was kind of like, I just had to swim upstream by myself until I got into high school. And then I played sports. And so I was trying to play I was getting recruited Division 1, but my grades and SATs, I couldn't get to that next level. So it was like, let's get her diagnosed so we can find out, like I can get the services. So that's kind of really when it was probably my junior or senior year. So I really was just like, I'm dumb, but we knew I had to learn. So from Brent's way, we knew I learned different. So it was like the narrative of my family, like, okay, because my dad, my sister, we knew, and that's really we didn't know any grandparent it was. So it was really my dad, but my mom was in education. So she didn't put a label on it, but she was like, you guys learn like your dad. Your dad struggled in school. So there was a narrative around it without the label. But then when my son was young, my oldest, because I have 3 kids, and my oldest, we were like, okay, he's dysgraphic, dyslexic, ADHD, dyscalculia. He was all of them. And we knew that pretty early. He was diagnosed third grade. So he, like you, it was kind of always a narrative. He was actually for 3 years, he went to specifically a dyslexic school. He was mainstreamed, he was public, private, but we went through the shitter trying to navigate that whole world. But for Brent, right, it was like he never even heard of the word. There was no, he just thought he was dumb, right? It was just like, you don't learn different, you're just dumb.
And I still believe that, again, because I was told that for how many years? At some point in time, it's kind of ingrained, into you, and that's why I love, what you do is, and I love obviously, just like it's hereditary. You knew your past, so I always say about 5 to 10% of people think it's a gift. I said the rest, 80 or 90 don't, because we don't know about it. We're still learning about it. So I love, like I said, your videos and the way you're open about it and the way you talk about it. It's awesome. We have fun. We always pass messages back and forth of, oh, look what he did today. Look what he's got going on today. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. How did you decide to do that? Like when was it that you were like, I want to start sharing it in this way for people to understand?
So I never had really talked about it up until about 3 years ago. So I was dyslexic. I knew I was dyslexic.
Yeah.
People like my friends and family all knew I was always very open. But it was in about 2022, I went through like a really crazy creative block. I was running my own podcast, interviewing creatives in industry about their journeys. And I'd got to this point where I literally just couldn't do anything. I'm a musician, photographer, all of that. I couldn't make a single thing. And I was really struggling. And that was going on for about 8 months. And I was like, I don't know when this creative thinking is going to come back. Like, I'm really worried. And then I was like, okay, I need to do something like totally out of my comfort zone. So I was like, okay, let's go do stand-up. Let's go do stand-up comedy. There's places around London. I was like, I'm just going to sign up. I'm just going to go. And so I went and I started doing stand-up for like 3 months. And I would go like most weeks, and I'd go perform somewhere maybe once or twice a week. And it was really fun. And it totally brought me out of my creative block. But I never did any jokes about dyslexia, even though I'd had a moment where I talked to someone else with dyslexic, and I was like, are you also afraid of the comma? And they'd be like, yeah, I am afraid of the comma. No one's ever said this. And I was like, I would love to do that on stage, but I was like, I don't know if there's an audience for that.
Oh, I love that.
In these small venues where there's like 20 to 50 people.
Yeah.
So I never did any of that, because I was like, I don't know if that will connect. But then when the year after in 2023 or late 2022, I was like, I've always wanted to do this joke, but I've never been able to. So I'm just going to download TikTok. So I downloaded the TikTok app and I uploaded a video being like, this video is only for dyslexics. And then I was like, is anyone else afraid of the comma? Because when I'm nervous, I'll just sprinkle them in after I've written a paragraph, and I think people are going to find out. And I uploaded that. And I was like, that was fun. And I put like hashtag dyslexic. And I left the app. I went about my day. I'd gone to like a gig that night. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, I uploaded that video to the TikTok yesterday. Let's see what happened. And I tapped on it, and it had been like 15 hours. Tapped on it, and it had like 100,000 views. And it was the first video I'd ever uploaded to TikTok. And I was like, the dyslexics have found me. And so I then, people in the comments were like, all going, this is so me as well. And then I like replied to one with another video being like, thanks so much. I'm actually pretty great at spelling. I have like 4 or 5 different ways of spelling the same word. You only spell one way. So who's unsatisfactory in English now? And then that one popped as well. So then suddenly I had these 2 videos within 24 hours of me not having the app, like over 100K on each of them. And I was like freaking out doing the refresh on my TikTok, and it was like another 100 followers. And I was like, whoa, this is the Dyslexic have found me. And then the next day I was like, okay, what else? Let's go into the piggy bank of my mind and my life. And I was like, okay, I used to count people ahead before reading sentences out loud. So I was like, let's do a video about that. And then that one went to like over 1 million. So within the space of a week, I had 3 videos go up to like 500,000 to 1 million views. And I'd gained 13,000 followers in like 7 days. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And the comments were like so supportive and so nice, so misspelt, but it was like totally cool. And it was just really random.
Right. I love that though. Brent, you go.
I was just curious, amazing. Obviously same thing, we talk about, we all have our correlations. I always say fear of the clipboard, and you walk in a doctor's office and your clipboard with 30 pages. I hand it in and hand it, but walk back, walk back out. But that block that you're referencing, any clue why, what led up to that? That made you, it was a purpose to get you to go your comfort zone. And I love that you did that, because obviously we live that, live our little shell, but I love that. But any reference and looking back to why you got that block?
It was just as we had come out of like the final lockdown in the UK.
Yeah.
So I'd gone on Clubhouse and I was using like the voice app, and I was trying to go Clubhouse. Amazing 2 months, and now it's dead. But in that 2 months, I was like, oh wow, this is so fun. I'm connecting with so many creative people, and I was really enjoying it. And I was actively getting episodes of my podcast recorded every week because I had this time while I was at home. And then suddenly it had gone from having this time and having people available to record basically whenever, because they were also at home as well, to suddenly everyone's scattered everywhere. I'm now going back into doing stuff in person, and all of my energy was just depleted. And I suddenly wasn't chatting to the same people on the apps, but I was then in person. And it was just like an overwhelming sensation of going back to being in person with everyone. Completely took out any of my processes of creating or doing anything extracurricular. And I literally, for like 2 months, I'd gone into quite a deep depression. And I'm normally a very positive guy and I don't really get sad. But there was like 2 months where I'd come home every day and I'd just go straight to my room. And I just wouldn't want to, I live with my sister, and I just wouldn't want to talk to anyone. And I play video games as kind of escapism. And like for 2 months, I just did nothing. And I remember about a month in, it was so random. I was like making a milkshake in my sorrow. And I poured the milk into the milkshake and it had curdled. So I poured like curdled milk into all of this stuff I just put into blend. And I lost my shit. And my sister was there like, what has just happened? And I was like, I don't know. Clearly there's something wrong, because it's literally just a milkshake and it's like the end of the world. And that was really the moment I was like, okay, I really need to go talk to someone and get some help, because I'm clearly, there's stuff which I couldn't identify as what it was. But I then got some support. And then after that, I then started to branch out again and do the stand-up to try and kick myself out of the funk.
I mean, so many different things. I mean, so I love that you were self-aware, because we talk about the self-awareness, which is so important. And there's so many people out there that are not self-aware. And I feel like there's a lot of dyslexics, people that learn different, where we know ourselves a little bit more, or we can kind of ride on that, but we don't always go to that next step. Like we could get into that deep, right? I mean, I know Brent, he can talk on this, where when he left, so he played in the NHL for 18 years. He won the Stanley Cup. Like, so he's been here.
Killing it, Brent.
Yeah. But then
I played roller hockey for 2 years. So we are basically on the same level.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Your music skills are mine. Same thing. I can't even strum a guitar. I can't even hold it.
Like 13-year-old Chris would have skated circles around anyone.
Right. Exactly. But I mean, when he left the league because of not having any skills, because that's what he was, right? I don't want to say bred to do, because that sounds crazy, like you're a horse or something, but like, you know, there you go.
Pretty good, actually.
Yeah, that was was that a very good horse? Don't even get started with the animal noises. So that was something that he then had this whole journey. I mean, drugs and alcohol and all these different things. And so when I say there's some of us that are very self-aware, I think it really depends on the person's personality and the struggles that they've had and then where in life. But all the stuff that he went through has now brought him to where he's going to change dyslexia, right? We're going to do so many different things. Your struggles brought to you to all of a sudden find this passion and connect with other people and put a light side of it. Like, okay, this is what got me out of it. But to be able to share your journey to get to that dot from that dot, not everyone can really look back and be like, this is what the time that happened. This is when this is like the straw that broke the back and going. But that's the work that you've done.
Well, and the lives that the lives that you've saved with these videos. Chris, I tell you, I just turned 47. Played in NHL, did that, played hockey for almost 40 years. Juliet's the first person I've connected with my life. Obviously going back to the typewriter, no computer stage, obviously being older, I didn't connect with anybody. Everybody thought I was a whack job weirdo. I am. But people are connecting with you by your videos and literally saving their lives. Somebody else is out there. Somebody gets me. Because most, a lot of people, like, again, back, look at me, they're like, dude, you're weird, you're whack. Like, why would you say that? Don't believe how we think. Don't think there's another way to think. So you're saving lives by doing your videos because people are connecting you. You got millions of viewers, and what you can lay your head down at night, and be in a place where, you literally are saving lives.
Thank you, Brent. I really appreciate that. It's it's quite deep when you think about it in that regard.
And I'm usually great at going deep because that's where I live, right? Because I've had drugs and alcohol. I've looked at suicide. I've been homeless. We can go on and on. So I've never had that. Sounds bad. The positive side of dyslexia yet, because I was so far down in it. And so and I'm speaking for myself from your videos. I'm one of them that connected, right? So, there's a few good things about social media, just a few, not a lot, but we're able to connect with people like you, and there's millions of other people that are connecting and thankful. And I'll just say thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Well, because go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say it's kind of crazy so last year when all of this stuff went kind of viral, and it was really exciting at the time. I didn't really know what to do with it. I was making videos, and then suddenly I was like running out of ideas, and then stopping myself from making videos because I was like, oh, will that go viral now? I need everything to go viral because that's what I'm used to. And when a video would only get 10,000 views, I'm like, oh, it's such a failure. And then I stopped for like 6 months. I stopped making videos. And then this year, building up to this new year, I was like, I just need to go in with a different headspace. Like anyone else who I talk to about this stuff, they're like, oh, I would like kill to have a video with 10,000 views, with 10,000 people who've seen that. And so this year I was like, just make it for you and make it for those messages that you get, not the hundreds of views, like the actual people who message you and say stuff. And that's when this year it suddenly popped off, and I started doing stuff on Instagram and TikTok, and like some of those videos have got like 5 million views now, like out of nowhere. But it's like, that's cool, that's a number, but it's the messages I get from, like, there was this guy who messaged me saying like, I'm 65, I've never laughed about my dyslexia, and you're the first person who's made me laugh about my dyslexia. And then other people being like, hey, I've always struggled to articulate to my friends what I go through, and you have articulated it in a way. So I've literally just sent them your video being like, this is me. And it's messages like that where I'm like, this is why I'm just going to keep going no matter what happens, because there's those moments, like you're saying, where it does it does have that impact and people don't feel alone. And yeah, it's just that's the fulfilling bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much any of that other stuff. It's like, if I genuinely feel like I've made a connection with someone and it's made their day better, it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you just said there. And I love how you shifted your mindset. So when Brent and I started Word Blindness, I had interviewed him for a television show and he was telling me about his foundation. And I was like, okay, I've been doing all of this stuff with my son, all the world that I've done. I always help people, but it's like, it's in the pockets that I'm in. And then when my kid is doing good, I'm like, I could breathe, and it's maybe not top of mind. And then something rears its head and then it's top of mind. And then I get angry. Like, why aren't things better? Why aren't systems better? Why isn't school better? Why isn't legislation better? And then I get angry and then I yell at people. And then it's this like cycle that I've been doing, pretty much probably his whole life for 18 years. And so when I met Brent and I said, I really think that we can add something especially with our different personalities, we can add something. And I remember we recently talked about this on the podcast, which was kind of fun, is I was in a space that I had started my first podcast in 2019. I actually had gotten on Clubhouse, and that's when it really kind of took off because I was like, this is incredible. I started learning about things. So I was on Clubhouse for, that whole year of that. So again, you're right. Like all the interviewing, it was just a really cool thing. I had a co-host on another episode, like in another series of mine, but I was like, I want Brent and I think we can really do something. And I started stressing myself a little bit like, okay, what if we run out of topics? And I never did that before. And I was like, what am I doing? This is so bizarre because it means so much to me. Right. It was because it really, my other stuff was like a creative outlet. It was like something that I was doing for myself, but this I knew could have a lot of impact. So I was putting this pressure on me and I stopped and I was like, no expectations. Let's just do it and see where it goes. And when I said that, it kind of just like released all of the pressure, right? Of the pressure of it. And then, as you said, like getting the messages from people that are like, thank you. Thank you. Because people don't, in my world, everyone talks about the positives and it's this and that. And you guys are talking about some of the real stuff that like we went through. Like some of your stories are heartbreaking, but I can remember being in school and having that happen to me, but I've stuffed it and I didn't want to talk about it because it just doesn't feel good. And you're giving me the space to think about it and then heal from it. And what you're doing is you're doing the same thing. You're bringing the humor side of it, which connects people and allowing them to think about, oh, we're not alone, right? We're others that are in this space have that same sort of experience, even though their experience is their own, but you're bringing light to it and talking about it where it's like, oh, you don't want to talk about your struggles because we only want to talk about the good and positive things. But no, you have to talk about the struggles. You have to talk about the things that are hard or you can't ever move on.
Yeah.
Now, I always say that, as a dyslexic, there's very few positive points till we can get out of that hole. Most of us, I always say we're 20, 30, 40 feet deep in pain, right? So we've got to build all the way back up to finally get lights to get to that positive side, and a lot of people don't see it. And there's no better remedy. I love cocaine and Adderall and alcohol, and it's so great, so amazing. Ecstasy, love it. But there's no better remedy than laughter.
Yeah. And it was really interesting when I got invited to the Dyslexia Show UK this year. And one of the friends I made, he's like a therapist. And he was saying that one of the things that he finds really interesting when he's doing therapy sessions for like neurodiverse people is actually speaking to the parents. Because like we said at the start, so many parents are also neurodivergent, but they don't realize it. Or so many are, and they did know, but there's a lot of stuff, like you said, that they haven't unpacked from their past. And a lot of what he does is preparing them that your kid's going to be going through something that you also went through and you really struggled with. And a lot of what will happen to them will trigger you for what you went through more than actually how it's triggering them. And that's a massive part. Julia, I'm curious what your thought was on that, because when he was saying that, I was like, that's so true. Like my dad was dyslexic, and I just know that there's some Luckily, my mum's not dyslexic. She is our go-to for spelling in our household, as everyone else is dyslexic. She's our designated, is this right? Before I send it to anyone.
Before you jump in, Joey, is your sister dyslexic too?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My sister's dyslexic. I'm dyslexic. My dad, my grandpa.
Perfect. All right. So that household between you and your sister are just wonderful.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
It is great.
Yeah.
But Julia, go on that conversation because we just came across this recently.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is every school year. The first week, I'm always a bag of anxiety. And I, always would be like, okay, what is it just because getting all the kids ready and all these different things? And, as I got older, it's bringing shit up for me. The IEP meetings, which here we call them in their individual educational plans. So like and I don't know what you guys call it in the UK, but basically, once you're diagnosed with a learning difference, you go and this kind of goes with you throughout the school so the teachers can see it.
Yeah.
I would fight all the time, and every meeting of those, I would cry, I would yell, I would be so much anxiety going into them. And I kind of always was like, why am I, but it's like when they're kids little, they talk about all of their shit, everything that they suck at, right? They don't talk about the positives. So then it brings a lot of stuff, a lot of my trauma that you want to protect the kid. You don't want your kid to go through what you went through, but then you're also like, some of the stuff I went through actually made me strong and actually made me who I am now, that now I am successful. So you also don't want them not to struggle at all, but it's this weird, like, oh my gosh, I just don't want them to get I don't want someone to hurt them where I was hurt by a teacher. And it is a really, it's a very surreal, weird, space to be in. And now my son's going to college and I'm like, okay. I went to university, I played sports and I know but then I'm like, okay, cause I know what my path was, right? I tried to drop out 1,000 times, until I actually then went into communications. I changed my major and I had my journey, but it was some really dark times. And I'm like you, I'm not one that typically gets severely depressed, but I've had moments where I have, and it's, and I don't like, I mean, who likes that? No one likes that, but I'm, it is crazy that really does happen. It brings up all of your shit.
It's, so many people don't understand us to be able to help us. And, a lot of times we don't even understand ourselves to help ourselves. So again, the earlier that we find it, the earlier that you found it, thank God it was only 2 months into that cycle that, that the curdle milk saved you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It tripped you off enough for you to snap, but you had enough wherewithal to go and see somebody. Now, let me ask you this question is, because I always say on here that when you go see somebody, therapist or counselor, whatever that is, I always say you've got to go to somebody who has your traumas. And ours is dyslexia. Did you go to somebody that is dyslexic, therapist, or talk to somebody that was dyslexic?
For me, actually, no. I had so with some of the work I do, I get free counseling sessions as part of that, a certain amount of hours a year. So I just went to one of their free ones, but I did change to a second person after I started speaking to the first. And I know some of my family members who have gone to see a therapist. They're like, "Oh, this doesn't feel right." And I think one of my family members, it was 3 therapists before they finally were like, this is the person who I want to talk to about this stuff. Because I think that's what people don't get about when you go to see someone is just because they have the qualification doesn't mean they're the right fit for you.
Right.
And like you're saying, Brett, sometimes that connector can be shared experience, shared trauma, maybe. So they get you when you're saying stuff, but also it can just be you find the right person and even the right environment, a literal building and a room can change how you experience and how you can share something. Yeah. And that's so important to not be afraid. If the first experience wasn't good, then it means that you can't ever go and share that experience with someone.
Friends, use it as a friend's reference. sometimes you don't find your friends till later on. You had 5, 10, 15 different friends. So you found that person to connect. A therapist and counselor might be the same thing. It might be the first time, my fiance gave her friend, they shared her best friend saved her a seat in the swing when they were 5. Mm-hmm. Great. Still best friends. Awesome. Yeah. But not everybody is like that. So you're right. It might take 2. It might take 3. It might take 4. Maybe it's going to a high rise on the 30th floor. Maybe it's somebody's home. Every one of us is different. So that's an awesome point. It's if you get it the first time, hallelujah. But if not, keep going till you find that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Chris, can you take us through a little bit of that Dyslexic show? Because I was like, what is this? What is this just a UK thing? I feel like you guys definitely have a little bit more, and I don't want to say wherewithal, but a little bit a different streamline with the Dyslexia.
They're way more advanced than you are over here. Because 100%. We both saw this line like, what is this? What is this?
I want to go to
I was going to ask this question to it too.
The first of its time. Yeah. So Aaron Smith, who's the founder of the Dyslexia show, has been running for 3 years now. And that is a 2-day show where he basically brings loads of people together and invites educators out, but also people who work in businesses to come and be in some of these talks, and individual people as well. So like me and my sister, I was speaking at the event, but me and my sister both went up because my sister wanted to speak to specific people about things that she wanted to learn about, because along with all the talks going on, there was a central area which had loads of people's businesses, loads of people who were part of like the governmental side of dyslexia support that you can get in the workplace or in education. And it was really interesting to go around and speak to them and actually experience that. But then also my favorite bit was just connecting with all the speakers, because it's like so many people where I felt like my network of dyslexic colleagues and allies was like tripled within 2 days.
Yeah.
And now I have these people who I can go talk to and rely on. And I know, and it was really cool. Everyone was so open to supporting. So one of the guys running a podcast there, which I jumped on, he was like, oh, let me introduce you to some other people I think would really work for what you're trying to do. And there was no scarcity mindset. It was everyone was there to try and support each other and bring each other forward.
I love that.
Yeah, that's, again, you guys are obviously we talk about Europe, but you guys are completely different. I played hockey in Russia. I was there for 3 years, Ukraine, all those kind of Sweden, Switzerland, been everywhere, completely different mindset, slept by the water, in US, obviously North America and Europe, but same kind of separation, correct me if I'm not wrong, Juliet, in the dyslexic world, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and I have so many thoughts on it, but I don't know that I can get them all together and articulate them correctly, because my head is just spinning on it, because it is, I mean, education, obviously in the United States versus, I used to work for a British company. And so we would always talk about, and I'm like, wait, you guys, that's so much better. What do there's so many different things. And that's a whole,
But we share a great candy. Like we got wine gums and coffee crisps and Aero bars. Not like you Americans. Reese's, yes. I'm in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, but it's a very interesting kind of, if you think about it, and why it can't be more universal, right? Okay. Like we know it helps, like there's a streamline that we know can actually really help the student. Like who is in there fucking it up, right? And I know who's in there fucking it up over here in the US, but it's just one of those things that it's just sometimes it surprises me, but then doesn't surprise me. But one of the things I love that you guys have that. One of the things that I do want to touch, and Brent's going to laugh at this, but when the word neurodiversity, so I don't love it. I
hate it.
Okay. Okay. And here's, yes, but here's why. And I would love for your thoughts on this. And I want you to be like 100% honest.
Yeah.
So I feel like, especially here in the US, so when my kid has his IEP, in New York, you can't say dyslexia. You say specific learning disability. So a teacher gets it.
What does that mean?
Like, what does that mean? There's so many specific learning disabilities. That's like, let's play hide and seek and not tell the teacher where I am ever. It's almost this like it's thing. So I feel like because everyone is really, that is like a big, obviously, bone in contention, because how can these kids get helped? How can you give the teachers any of the tools if you're not telling them how these kids learn? And they get, 10 to 12, sometimes in some of these classes, but you can't put it in. And so some states you're allowed to put it in, some states you're not. And which I think is just horseshit. Everyone should be able to put it in. You should be able to put in how you learn. So to be able to give the teacher the blueprint. So it's like, okay, this is how I learn. This is how I'm going to teach this kid, instead of like, let's play games here. But I feel like somewhere down the line, because people are like, I don't like the word learning disability. I don't like special ed. Those are negative, words. Because again, it encompasses everything, and you can't take each way you learn out. So someone can say, okay, you're dyslexic. I understand that. This is how I'm going to teach you. Oh, okay, you're ADHD. This is how I'm going to handle you. You're dysgraphic. Like, if you know what it is. So I feel like someone was just like, okay, let's make everyone shut the fuck up about the LD. We'll make a word that makes the neurodivergence feel like we're now referring to how they learn, but they're still putting it all together, and you're still not separating the different words. And so it's still the same problem,
Well,
but now it's just a word that maybe makes everyone feel better. So I don't like it.
Yeah, autism's grouped into that. So autistic, autism, dyslexia. It's how many clumped into one.
I think it's interesting. I think that I've never. So when I was in school, dyslexia was just
Dyslexia.
what we were speaking about. So that was like 10 years ago. Neurodiverse and neurodivergent says like we are neurodivergent in a neurodiverse world because everyone's got a different way of thinking and working. I'd say that for me, I've always felt that word is like a coming together of people. Like I feel connected to people who are neurodivergent because I know that they've probably struggled in similar ways to me. And this is where if we come together as one, we can make change for all of us. And also the weight of that as the neurodiverse or neurodivergent community is, so I'd say that I've because I had this question when I was doing some talks before, and I was like, I just feel like I totally get what you're saying, and I totally get that everyone can have a different view on it. For me, it's always felt like a coming together of people, and kind of like we can own that word, and then we can push for all of us to get support and get help and advocate for each other, because it's not just the 15% of people who are dyslexic. I think there's so much there, but I wouldn't say I totally get what you mean about with education. It's going to be really difficult because there are so many different learning styles, and different ways that people need support, and that's where I thought it was quite interesting. Do you know Made by Dyslexia, the charity, the UK charity? So like they worked with the New York mayor, and they had all of the schools in New York have the teachers do the free training, and that's where I thought that was quite.
They said they did, but I have many.
Oh, really?
I have many New York. I live in New York.
Okay.
So we won't go down.
Go down that rabbit hole there,
but that's what they said they did.
But yeah,
I saw a lot of smiles when I started saying that.
Yeah.
But we're not here to shit on anyone, so I'm not. No. But yeah, it's that's what they said, and it really seemed like it was great. I was very excited about it until I was like, okay, I want to know about what was it? What was it?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
But, and you've got a great point. We're all trying to obviously come together as a group.
Yes.
And now how can we do both? How can we come as a group and support each other, but then on the education side, not be clumped together because we all learn differently. So, obviously you got your great points. None of this is easy. We're talking about our brain. Oh, they can't see it. So it's obviously great points. It's a long-term battle to be able to get, non-dyslexics, non-neurodiverse people to see something that they can't see.
Yeah. And I love how you said that, because that made me think of it different. That's why I wanted to ask you, since you were using it, I was like, I want to know your viewpoint of it. And I do see the positives of there, right? That we all learn different. And I think mine is I'm being very specific, right? I'm thinking in one scenario. And every time I hear like, well, we're using that word, I'm like, and then I get angry because I'm like, no, but that's you now just made it a different word. And it's still the same problem.
there's definitely like, if it's been used in the wrong context and it's not actually what the person is meaning, that's when it can be called out. But it's like, I use it in my own context of like when I was developing training materials for people I was teaching, I was like, okay, it's not just I'm a visual learner or I'm a kinetic learner. Like, I need to get my neurodivergent friends who are ADHD. Like, how do I bring everyone in? So if I'm developing this from the ground up, I know that I'm making sure this is trying to be as inclusive as possible. But I totally get and agree with what you're saying as well.
Because a lot of fun that I've found in this world is a lot of names like this or certain programming, certain things are created by non-neurodivergent, non-dyslexic, non-ADHD people with with not learning disorders or differences that are leading the naming charge, or call it whatever you were, however it is. That's what I come across a lot.
Yeah. And that's
I don't know if it just you go, Jim.
No, go.
I was just saying, I don't know if it's just from different rooms you're in,
right.
And I don't know if there is a discrepancy between the US and the UK. The US has got 230 million people. There's 60 million in the UK. So there's easier and further, like there's more people to get things mixed up with, and a much bigger system for that to be pushed into. But I would say, I know you were saying earlier about like the UK seems to have it better. I would say that like my parents remortgaged their home so I could go to private school with a small section of kids to have a dyslexia department as well, up until year 6, up until I was 11. And then I went to state school, public school, and I had built all of these coping mechanisms and all of this stuff that then helped me in state school just stay up with everyone else there. Because when it was all my tests, it's like the IQ is high, but there's really specific things that he struggles with. And that's what they were helping me build up. So then I could actually thrive, still struggle, but have moments of real positives within the regular school system. And also when I went from one private school to another private school, when that one shut down, the dyslexia teacher in the other one was like, oh, he's been getting taught like this way in his dyslexia support. And actually, like, that's how his sister needs support. But he needs support, like he's not picking up this part. He's like he's not picking up phonics. Like, that's what I'm going to work with him on. And then suddenly I went from, oh, he seems to be going to dyslexia support all the time, why isn't he improving, to shooting off and having a massive change within a short period of time. And it's because, like you're saying, even within dyslexia, there is a diverse range of how people learn and what support they need.
Yeah. And then bringing in, I love that. And I love that you had that teacher that saw you and was like, let me, because but again, your parents had to mortgage, right? If your parents didn't have the money, this is what we talk about often. It's the kids. 50% of prisoners are dyslexic. 50 here in the US. Like, that's disgusting, right? That is so sad to me, because people will say, oh, it's, the system's broken. Yeah, we know all the systems are broken. We don't need to keep continuing talking about that. But it's the brilliant minds that could have been that we're missing out on. That's what breaks my heart. It's those people that were never seen because they didn't have the money. They weren't in the school districts. They weren't. And it's just, it is a really, really, that all of that has to change so much. But the fact that you had that teacher that had the wherewithal to be like, okay, this is what we need to do is pretty amazing, because she changed your life, right? She changed your life. And there was teachers, Brent, and sad because Brent didn't, but when I was doing, this is where like the whole IQ test and all the testing is always interesting. Like and especially when I was younger, I was very ADHD. So I probably had like red, yellow number or whatever die. And then I'm taking the IQ test and I, couldn't focus worth shit. So it came back like, oh, all right, well, this is the best she can do. And she's a girl. In those days, it was like, well, she's not going to be good in math. So let's forget about it. And let's just kind of let her, float. Those are the times where you need those teachers to be like, wait, I see something. But that's where that teacher obviously was educated, or she just was an innately good teacher. Like, my mom was a really innately good teacher. She could pull that out of kids, and she just innately knew. Could have been because of, having kids and her husband, or it could have just been that's how she was born.
Yeah. And yeah, I know Brent was clapping earlier, but yeah, it literally just takes the one
that's
to
it.
actually invest in it, and it can completely change your trajectory in the education system.
Kudos
Right.
for her. That clap was all for her to find you and understand you.
Yeah. And that's where it's like you're giving these IEPs to these teachers, and then the teachers are getting shit on because it's like they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But how are they supposed to be doing if you can't put the word dyslexia in their IEP or dysgraphia or dyscalculia or whatever? You can't put the specific. How are they supposed to know the blueprint of this kid? They're just trying to get through the day and being like, okay, let's just see. So that's where, all of that. But, that's like, we can go down and down and down, and I can sit there and yell and scream. And I know, I know you're not legend. You're like, I can't do anything about it. I live in the UK. Shut the fuck up.
But
that's interesting. Like I've met. Oh yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say how different. How like you made a reference to the size of things, right? In Canada, there's 45 million. You guys got 60 million. The U.S. has got 350 million. So it's not comparing apples to apples. It's apples and oranges. In that size wise and be able to implement it.
Yeah, and like it takes people from the outside advocating and shouting about it, and it also takes people on the inside, like you're saying, the teachers who really have that positive intent, but also teachers like I've made friends on TikTok who are educators in and are dyslexic, are ADHD, and they're the advocates inside the buildings.
Right.
And it takes everyone from every direction to be able to make that change. And I know that it can sometimes feel like, are we moving? Like, is there movement? I think there is. It's going to be slow movement, like anything, especially in like a state-funded situation, like most of education is. But I definitely think that like there's always that positive. Like, just imagine in 50 years. Like everyone goes, oh, when I was in school, they didn't know about dyslexia. You could actually get diagnosed with dyslexia in like the 20s or something. Like they knew about it within education, but they didn't really invest in it, do much about it. And so I really hope, and I'm super optimistic that like my kids or my kids' kids will be in a space where one, they feel like everyone's just learning in their own way, in their own style. But two, they have that support that they need. At the moment, I always was curious, why aren't we surely to advocate to every year 7 gets screened for dyslexia, ADHD, that type of thing. But I do know that with such an underfunded education system, you could say that the fear of, they could say it's a reasonably cheap to pay to get people diagnosed. But as soon as there's a diagnosis, then there's an obligation of care and a duty of care to actually support that kid. So if we're not getting the diagnosis, then, well, we then don't have to pay for all the back end of actually then supporting those kids. So it's really interesting, like at what point and what will be the first step to then really progress that going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to think about and so much to do, but
there's too much to do.
We could do this for 8 straight hours and come up with 8 million different things,
yeah.
Can't get to 2, get to 1. I got super, taglines as you do, what you said is a point that I make all the time is right. Diagnosis is great, but if you don't have step 2 and 3, in process with 1, then you just wasted time and money. And what?
Yeah, but there's people like you, even as like bringing the awareness of it. And that there's like that, those are the important things, there's the action parts that, that is needed too. I love that dyslexia show. I mean, I think that's brilliant, bringing people together that are like-minded, that have understanding. And again, it's like, oh, that person gets me. Right. I mean, one of the things that's really cool is, and then I'm going to take 2 minutes for this, but what I love is, and you kind of touched on a little bit, but everyone's dyslexia is different. And one of the things on the show, on our podcast, when we have individuals that we've had individuals that was the first time that they were really talking publicly about their dyslexia. So they were really uncomfortable, right? Really uncomfortable because they're like, this is so weird. I don't love it. You obviously, as you said, you got diagnosed when you were 7. So it's been always a narrative in your house, your dad, your sister. Can you tell us a couple things, and you do it on your your reels and your Instagram stuff, and that's what I love. I'm like, oh my God, I do that, and it's almost like this like fun little, oh, we're in the same playground, right? We're in the same sandbox. I do that too. Yeah. But not everyone does, right? So like I left and right. Today was my first day back. I've been traveling like crazy. My first day back to yoga. to get my brain to remember my lefts and rights is so hard for me. And I'm 50, right? Like it's like, I mean, I had to stop. I had to do the L, and then I was like, oh, my L's backwards in my head today. So then I had to write my name in the air. I mean, I'm like literally doing JUL. Okay, this is my left. But I had to, because I wasn't doing it for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That is something it hurts my brain to think of my lefts and rights, even though I have a wedding ring. And everyone's like, don't you just know it's wrong? And I'm like, no, my brain does not naturally do that. And I know it sounds so silly to someone that does not have to think about it, but I literally have to think so hard about it. And it takes me a second. So it looks like sometimes I'm not following or whatever. What are some of the things that you have been surprised that you've put out on, your reels and your TikToks that others have been like, oh my God, I've done that? And then vice versa. What are some that you don't get as many people being like, oh, I do that too?
I think that the ones where they were really big, so that like the newer videos where I think is where you found me when I was like, I'm dyslexic, of course and I'd go into like different things I do.
I love it.
The first video I made was all the ones that I connected with more.
Okay.
So it was things like I can't even remember now what the first one was.
Yeah,
but I then was like, oh, I'll make a second one, but it probably won't be as big because less people will connect with this. And I started off with, of course, I'll like write a word 3 times and then just choose the one based purely on gut feel. And another one where it's like, of course, I'll just change my entire sentence because I can't figure out one word within it. So I'm like, well, it's just going to be another sentence now. And like those ones where I didn't connect with as strongly, still stuff I did, but I was like, more people will connect with this. That was the one that really blew up on both TikTok and Instagram.
Oh, wow.
And it was really cool that like, yeah, the things that the other one in that one, which I really was like, yes, this is it, was when you're in a standoff with spell check because you spelt something wrong. You know it's wrong, but it doesn't know what to do. And you're just both there like, well, what do we do now?
I don't even use spell check because it still looks wrong to me anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so
and like
funny.
I Google around the word because I can't spell the word, and I'm like, ice cream? I don't know, like cold milk-based product, and it's like, oh, it came up, okay. That's how
do the song or dance.
So that's been a really interesting one where, yeah, the standoff with spell check was a big one. People counting ahead in class.
Yes.
The 2 things I found the most with that is, yeah, kids with dyslexia were like, I would always count ahead to find the sentence that was mine and then practice that over and over. People with dyslexia, but also people with anxiety.
Yes.
Where a lot of people were messaging go, oh, I actually really struggle with anxiety. And that is something I would do all the time, just so I could focus in on the thing I was meant to do.
Yeah.
Which I found really interesting. The one where I said like, oh, the people talk about the letters moving, but I don't really get that. And I had people message in going, oh, that's because that is actually Erlen syndrome for a lot of people. Yeah, there might be eye fatigue and you might struggle, but Erlen syndrome, which is not spoken about a huge amount, is actually where if you're getting swirling of words or you're also getting migraines from like fluorescent light, that is something that is often mistaken for dyslexia, but actually is something totally different. And there are really not easy ways. There's 2 reasonably simple ways you can try and support it, and then there's other ways as well. Do you 2 know of Erlen syndrome?
Yes,
he does. I think after you put that, I read it because my stuff doesn't float. Like I flip stuff, but my stuff doesn't float. I just can't sound things out and read really slow.
Yeah, you talk about reading paragraphs. When I was getting sober, we have AA. The Blue Book it's called, and there's ones where you can go and there's reading ones, right, where everybody takes a paragraph. Well, first couple I walk in, I'm like, the fuck we are. I'm trying to get sober, and then they want me to read too. What else do they want? Like,
that is torture, though.
It was finally.
Yeah,
I think the first one I did, people were like, dude, what is wrong with you? Then I never went back to a reading one, right? That almost like I didn't almost relapse and go back to alcohol, but sure, didn't go back to that meeting. Or now I had make sure that there was no reading in any of these. I walked out of there again, probably just about as bad place as when I walked into rehab, just from the reading portion.
But that's why this is so important, because again, in a thing where Brent's trying to get sober and he's trying to like stay sober, and then he's going back into like, and it's like AA is not thinking about, oh, let's think about why, like they should have, that should be something that someone thinks of, but whoever is running, the groups, they're not thinking of that. But that's like a really important thing. I think and I think it was your video where it's like you count ahead and then they give Johnny like 2 paragraphs and you're like, fuck.
Like, well, now it's over. Yeah.
And then you have to go back and count and you're sweating.
Yeah.
But the thing is that when I tell that to people, they're like, oh, that's stressful. I'm like, but the thing that is lost is that I am not learning anything the teacher or the kids are reading, because I'm so focused on trying to see when I have to read out loud. And the listeners know there was, in my freshman year, I had to read out loud. Mrs. Miller, I've never said her name. Sorry. I think she's passed. But anyways, I said pubic instead of public. And she asked me if I was retarded in front of the whole class. And then it's like, I mean, so many different things, but it's those, when you see someone that is struggling, why do you continue? I mean, that's what she would always make sure that I was called, because she knew that, I would mess things up. And it's like, it's just mean. And that's why bringing the awareness that you're doing and thinking about it. Because if a teacher does listen to or see your thing, they might be like, oh shit. Okay. You know what? I need to adjust that. I didn't think about it, because most teachers, and I shouldn't say most, but a lot of teachers go into education because they were good at school and they don't realize that someone is not making a choice to not do well. Like they think, well, just try harder. What's wrong with you? Just school. Like it's easy for them. So why isn't it easy for you? My mom used to say that to me all the time. That's actually what used to get me through everything, because she would say that and I'd be like, you're right, Mom. All right. Fuck that teacher, or whatever.
And there's a lot of people message me who are like parents of kids with dyslexia, and they're like, thank you for making these videos, because I can now kind of see into their mind a little bit more. And I'm so glad for that, because a lot of the power within education with kids who are like dyslexic is the parents being the advocates and being hands-on. And the biggest thing I got from Jo Rees, one of my friends who does TikToks as well, she was saying that like, because she is a person who does the like identifies if kids are dyslexic as well.
Okay.
But she was saying like one of the biggest misconceptions she feels is that that the parents have to fight the school to advocate, but actually one of the biggest things is that they have to work with them, because the school is there for nearly all of the education. And it's like, it is a hard thing, but like you really got to be understanding that you're going to be stood by this with the school tackling the problem, not at the school attacking them for not tackling the problem. Like you got to work together, and it's real hard, but that's how, like, for a lot of people it can benefit.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Again,
Brent, I saw you smiling. I don't know. It's okay if you disagree.
No.
I was thinking.
There's so many different things. Like we could go for 8 hours again. And maybe even more than that. And it's again. We both have kids. We've had to go through that whole school system, and I was just smiling about just how different the playing fields are for you guys, and for us, and just kind of the difference of the world. But don't stop what you're doing, because literally when those videos out, you're saving lives.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found was something that, as like an adult, I had to unpick, because there's a lot of stuff that I'm still working on within myself, and especially when doing projects and working on things, the biggest thing was, for so long, up until about 25 years old, which is only a couple of years ago, but like it took me so long to decide that I wouldn't never show anyone anything until it's complete. Like I would always talking about those, like putting up those barriers so you can never be embarrassed again. I would only show something I was working on when it was 100% done. And it would take me 3 times longer, because it's that last 20% that, unless you have someone to bounce that idea off of, it's just not going to get there. Right. And it was actually just one of my managers in a project I was working on, who was like, you just got to, it's like that 80% rule, like get 80% of the way there and then let someone else in to help you who you trust. And for me, that was a big unpicking of my upbringing of, I don't want to show anyone until I'm done. And it's partly because I'm a creative, and I think as you all creators as well, like you have an idea, perfect idea in your head, and unless it's there, you're kind of upset. But also, it was definitely, that was the aha moment for me. Is like, oh, this is because of what's happened in my past, where I'd be like, never again will I be embarrassed in front of people, because I'm not going to show something until I'm like 100%. They can't fault this. But it just slows you down so much.
Yeah. Oh, Chris, I mean, I know we said we were going to have you for an hour, so I'm going to stay with it. But as Brent said, we could talk for hours. And I'm so glad that your video popped into my reel, because it makes me laugh out loud. And I send it to so many people, because you really bring a light to it, and awareness, and you do it brilliantly. You really do. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, Chris, keep doing what you're doing. Keep making us laugh. Keep saving lives. If you need someone, across the pond, you've got us.
Yes,
you got this friendship. You got this dyslexic. We're always here for you.
Yeah,
appreciate you. When you do the dyslexia show for the US, I'll come over.
All right, perfect.
Yeah,
you're the head. You're the lead.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah.
You're our keynote, right? We got some work to do on there. You guys, you know what I say every single time: like, rate, review, and share. You don't know who needs to hear this, and you have to check out Not Campbell Soup on TikTok and on Instagram, because you will be. It's really fun, and it's really educating. So when you can educate, as Brent always says, you can't educate if someone's not having fun, and Chris brings both brilliantly. So thank you again for joining Word Blindness Dyslexia Exposed.
Thanks so much.